My guest today is a game developer and creative director whose career spans more than 2 decades of work across some of the industry's most varied and inventive projects. Born in Sri Lanka, he moved to the United States at the age of 8 and grew up watching his parents rebuild their lives from scratch, an experience that shaped both his work ethic and his creative perspective. After leaving art school early, he taught himself the skills that would carry him into the games industry at just 19 years old. There, he contributed to titles such as The Elder Scrolls III, Morrowind, and The Matrix Path of Neo. In 2017, he co-founded Outerloop Games, a fully remote studio built around collaboration across continents and with a commitment to diverse personal storytelling. Since then, the studio has released games including Falcon Age, Thirsty Suitors, and now Dosa Divas, a game that combines turn-based combat and cookery. Welcome, Chandana Ekanayake.
That's awesome, Simon. Thank you for that amazing intro. 2 decades. I think this year will be 30 years.
Really? Nice. Oh, amazing.
Feeling old.
So, yeah, I mean, you've released quite a few games, but we happen to be talking just a couple of days. Oh, is it the day of your game's release today, or did it come out on Friday?
When we're recording this, it'll be tomorrow.
It'll be tomorrow. Okay, so how are you feeling?
It's weird. Like, it's mixed emotions. I'm happy with, we're able to build another game. It's always great. Like, my sort of level of success is that can we make another game with the team we have, and anything beyond that is out of our control. So, but releasing a game, I think there's been a handful of cancellations over the 30 years, but I think this is, I want to say my 13th or 14th released game, and it doesn't get easier. Like, there's always this weird sort of anxiety, like right before, as you finish a project, and like you spend all these years. For us in this game, it's been like 2 years and 3 months or so. Previous one was like 3.5 years, and the previous one was like I think 2 years as well. But you spend years essentially, myself and the rest of the team of 14, putting all this energy and attention and like thousands of decisions that go into making a game. And once that's done and released, it's like, I don't know where to place the energy. So it's like almost like this a depression that happens after release, and it happens every project for me. And I've talked to other developers, and it's like, do you ever feel this way? And they're like, yeah, there's like this weird, where do I put the attention? And I think that's, I'm able to deal with it better now than I used to be able to, because it was like a weird sadness, even though you just finish this thing and release it. And whether it's reviewed well or not, whether it's selling well or not, it's still like this, where do I point my energy?
Yeah, right. It's so funny you mention that. Like, literally today I was hanging out with a writer friend of mine who writes books, and he was saying that the tip he's kind of learned is like at the moment of releasing his book, he just kind of has to know what he's doing next so he can put his energy into that thing. Otherwise, it's just, like you say, just sort of like buzzing around, and you're paying too much attention to reviews and sales figures and all of that.
Yeah, and I think that's why I think even early on, like I always have 2 or other things I'm tinkering with. Right. Like today we're having meetings. As reviews are coming out, we're talking about like, oh, this prototype we want to work on. So like focusing purposefully putting the attention onto that. I think that's helpful. Yeah.
Before we talk about what's next, we should talk about Dosa Divas. So
yes.
Yeah, like for someone coming to it cold, what is the game?
Dosa Divas, we call it it's a cooking themed turn-based combat or turn-based RPG. Or we've been calling it a spicy JRPG because there's definitely some influences from, not that all JRPGs are a specific way, but there's influences for myself for previous game and this from like Super Mario RPG and Paper Mario Thousand Year Door. And for Dosa, we have like a boosts and shield breaking systems that you see in games like Octopath, and then all this sort of, it's like an active combat RPG. All around these 2 sisters who are chefs, and they ride around in their food truck mech named Goddess in this sci-fi world. The sisters haven't seen each other in 10 years, so they're kind of just rekindling their relationship, and also they're like want to go see their parents. And along the way, you visit these different villages, and you find your younger sister has taken over the family restaurant and turned into this fast food empire. So you're like fighting her goons. We call them Lena goons, and then. In cooking, and you're essentially in this world, cooking has been forgotten or banned, and everyone's on these Lena meals, which are very efficient out of toothpaste tubes, which is, we were thinking about like what's the worst way you can eat food, and probably tubes are it. So all for efficiency. So it's like you're going through these villages, you're making home food and fighting goons and learning new recipes along the way. And then we kind of tackle these themes of family dynamics and family trauma and reconciliation, as I think through all three of our games that we've done. It's been a common theme.
Nice. And so for people who don't know, dosa is a type of pancake, right, from South India. What's your personal connection to that particular type of food?
My general connection to this game and our previous games, just food in general, I feel like it's the first point of contact, or it's the first way someone is introduced to a culture, and that way food is magical. And throughout history, like as folks have immigrated and traveled from continent to continent, you see like traces of a certain type of food. Dosa is made from rice and fermented lentils and other things. So the fermentation came from Malaysia, as far as people think. So some of that traveled to India, and then there's a dosa or thosa depending on the region. So South India is really where this came about in the 5th century. But I had a version of it in Sri Lanka that's like thicker, and we called it something different. So it's
what'd you call it in Sri Lanka?
It's kind of like a thosa as well. It's like a variation, but so just generally, and I love to cook. I do people on the team, so it's like just using food as a way to connect with people has been our sort of approach. But it's delicious. So,
and do you make dosas from scratch yourself?
I was going to make some videos as coming up, so we'll see. Not happy with them yet, so.
But still working on your technique.
I live in sort of outside of Seattle, in the Seattle metropolitan area, and there's a lot of great South Indian. If you want to find a dosa, you have to find a good South Indian restaurant.
And I mean, not to get too deep too quickly, but you brought it up. You said the themes of this are about family trauma and reconciliation, and that's been a common theme to the games that you've made. What's that about?
Am I in therapy now, Simon?
We'll see, I guess.
Actually, it's a great question. Yeah, I think it spans from, we immigrated from Sri Lanka when I was 8. My brother, who's, almost 4 years, 12, and my sister was 4. And my parents, there was a civil war going on in Sri Lanka with, had been for a long time. And my parents were having a hard time living there. And they were like, hey, we see this as an opportunity for the kids to have a chance at life or a better life. And my great uncle is a Buddhist monk. He was been a Buddhist monk since he was 12, and he immigrated to the U.S. for missionary work and different things, like in the late 60s, for the right around the Vietnam War, where he was helping Buddhist refugees kind of with sort of Buddhist ceremonies and things as they were coming to the U.S. And he established sort of like the presence here, and then the rest of the family. I have a huge family on my dad's side, so we immigrated to Maryland, which is where I grew up here in the U.S. And I think there's 70 relatives, all within like 10 miles of each other. So
you all moved over a period of a few years?
From like sort of 80s to the 90s. And so for me, it's like, I came over when I was 8, so I have memories of Sri Lanka, but then growing up here since then, I feel like I belong in both places, but also neither place. And we've gone back I have kids now, but we've gone back several times, and it's like this weird, like, growing up in two places, not fully, completely feeling like I belong to either, but also both, and embracing, which part of it. Like, it's growing up here. Like, I learned English when I moved to the U.S., playing Mario Brothers, playing Zelda. Like, I learned English with that, watching, public broadcasting and things. And there are times, I think when I was younger, I was trying my best to like not stand out, try to fit in as much as possible, which I think is like a survival technique when you're a kid. And then it's taken me a long time to be comfortable with like sort of the differences, the culture differences and the type of food we eat. And I kind of, embrace it as I gotten older. And so exploring those sort of the food and the differences in family dynamics from what I grew up with, what typical sort of American kids have, that's been almost like a journey to try to connect with, my past and the family more. My mom's probably the best cook in our family. And I didn't realize she was the best cook in our family till like I talked to my cousins even recently. They're like, oh yeah, your mom, when she cooks, we all pay attention. And I've cooked with her multiple times or many years, and I've tried to learn her recipe, but she doesn't. This is probably pretty common with a lot of Asian moms too, which is like, there's no recipe. You just watch her. I go, how much? She's like, oh, this much till it's enough. And then so it's all cooking by taste. So I've like gotten better at making her dishes, making her curry chicken and her potatoes and red beets and things. And where she, and then I kind of mix my own recipes. So I'm like cooking for her now. She's like, oh, how'd you do that? And I'm like, okay. Like, I feel like I hit some kind of level where I get my mom's respect in it. But like those kind of connections where I'm like using cooking as a way to connect with my parents. And we did that in Thirsty, and we do that in this game too, where I grew up in a family where we never really talked about our feelings that much. So it was very like closed off. But when we're cooking together, she has her guard down. Then I can like just ask questions about like, how things were when I was younger and just more stories. And she's just more open to on that. And just kind of unpacking all that through games. Not that games is therapy. I do have a therapist, which has been really, really great. But it's like sort of the art and understanding and sort of understanding myself better growing up and like why I am a certain way with my parents. And also I'm like, oh, I see the resemblance with my kids. So it's like when you're in your 40s, you're in this sort of middle period where your parents are getting older, your kids are getting older, and you kind of seeing these like, where do I belong in this? And exploring that through games and through therapy has been really rewarding.
Interesting. Cool. Well, we've got lots to dig into there. But before we do, we better come to the premise of the podcast. So I've asked you to pick the 5 video games you'd like to put on your ideal fictional games machine. We're going back to 1991 for your first game, as we might guess from what you've told us there. Obviously a key moment for you. This is a Super Nintendo game. Tell us, Echo, what's the game? Why'd you love it?
It was the Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past. Picking 5 games, Simon, is so hard. All of them I picked for, I was like thinking about sort of like the impact on me and sort of wanting to make games or talk about games, or somehow it connected with me better. And of course, the first Legend of Zelda when it came out, and I think it was, I looked back, I couldn't remember, but I think Metroid and Zelda both came out almost like a month apart in the US. And I'm like, I find that amazing because I spent so much time in both. I want to say I was, 85, 10 when first Zelda came out. And this is a couple years later, but, Link to the Past wouldn't exist without the previous, I think 2 or 3 Zeldas before that. The thing I really, really gravitated to and why Link to the Past that I revisited, and I think there was a remake too on 3DS, Link Between Worlds, which is like different mechanically but similar. It's a beautiful game, and how it starts, it's like Link's uncle in this little house. He gets a message from Zelda, like a telepathic message, and he goes out to save her. And then you're Link, and you wake up and you follow along, and you follow your uncle into this dungeon, and you see that I think he's dying, and so he gives you the sword, and you continue the quest. And the game starts, it's like raining. It's like a beautiful pixel art. It's moody. The music is it just it's perfect for it. So it's just like for me, I think at this time I was just getting into high school. I think I was a freshman in high school. So I had sort of learned English at 8, got into music and movies, and I found a real interest in like cinema, like storytelling in movies and storytelling in games and film and TV shows and I want to say atmosphere as a concept. Like I know it's broad, but like certain pieces of movies or certain scenes or certain shows or certain piece of music just hit me in a way. I was like, oh, I can imagine a world how this this piece of art works in. So like Zelda, the Link to the Past kind of hit me that way, where it's like, oh, it feels like a world, and then you get a sense of these characters, and I think it's one of the first Zeldas had like these cutscene moments, but are all done in sort of this top-down pixel art in-game view, and kind of all those kind of me learning about things that interest me, and also playing this game. It came out at just the perfect time, and at this point, I hadn't considered games as a career because I was an artist. I still am an artist, but my brother was an artist in the family, and then he stopped drawing, and I picked it up. He taught me how to draw when I was little, and so I was drawing, and I was reading comics and watching film, and just getting into games. And games was like this thing that just blew my mind. There's so many amazing games that was just like I would get lost in for hours, and Link to the Past is just hit me at the right time, I think, in my sort of development and formidable years.
Yeah, it's a good age to have a Super Nintendo as well, I think, that in that era, because like you say, so many bangers, and just so vivid, weren't they? And a real step up, I think, from the NES stuff.
Oh yeah, I think it had was a mode 7.
Mode 7.
It's like this kind of parallax 3D thing, and I remember the Final Fantasy 3 or 4. I forget what they called it in the U.S. versus Japan, but like I also had that. There's some really interesting things with Super NES at the time, but yeah, that game just, I don't know. It's all the things like the storytelling, the gameplay, and how it's presented, the pixel art, the mood, like the atmosphere, and anything. Just really, really a memorable game that I would revisit.
Yeah, it really holds up as well. I went back and replayed it last year for this show, and yeah, so good. Still really holds up, I think. Yeah, the original. Yeah,
the original. And then when it ends, it does this thing as the credits roll, where it'll like go through the characters you meet in the different parts and you see what they're doing. Like they're like walking through a village or talking to people, the people you save. Like and like that's something I always wanted to do in a game. I think I might have had. We kind of do that in our credits in Dosa, actually. So you run through the world you visited and you see all the characters. They'll follow you in our version. But like that credit sequence really stuck with me too.
Well, I mean, you've already given us some information about your earliest years, but you said you do remember some things from when you lived in Sri Lanka pre 8 years old. Would you remember?
We lived in a house that my parents built while my mom was pregnant with me, and it was a pretty decent sized house. We kept bees. I remember this like fountain we had and the bees, and then running around barefoot everywhere because I just remember like being really proud of my callous feet. I mean, we had shoes, of course, but like it's just like as a kid, we just like run around. There was like this little corner store that I would run to and back, and yeah, it was like, and then we had, it was like in a village that's not really close to Colombo. I mean, it's like near Colombo, but it was like in a more of a suburb area, and I don't think I knew we were poor because we just didn't need for things. And my parents made it, we cook at home, and we had neighbors and friends and hung out, and we had, that's the thing I love when I go back to Sri Lanka. I'm like, this is what tropical fruit is supposed to taste like. Like the mango is perfectly ripe, and it's, it's like, it's 80 degrees year round, 80, 90. I mean, we have 2 seasons. We have monsoon, we have sun, but like it's warm year round. And I just have vivid memories of like fresh food, running around, having a great time. And
are you speaking Tamil at this time?
So there's Tamil and there's Sinhala, and I speak Sinhala. My mom spoke some Tamil, but yeah, I spoke Sinhala, and I still do. I try to, when I speak to my mom and my sister or my brother, I'm like trying to speak in a Sinhala because I understand it fluently, but if I don't use it enough, definitely goes back. But when we go back to Sri Lanka, a week there, I'm like, it comes back.
You're back in.
Yeah.
Nice. So you're 8 years old, you're proud of your calloused feet, and your parents sit you down and say, hey, there's a thing called a civil war happening. We're gonna follow your great uncle to America. How did you receive that news?
Yeah, so I mean, I got a sense of it because there was like curfews, and there was like certain things were banned from imports and things like that at the time. So it, we're starting to feel some of it. My dad's younger brother, my uncle, had moved to the U.S. recently and wanted to, my dad was working at the post office. He was like had a postmaster kind of a job, but he was a tinkerer. He would build stuff all the time. He built a projector for us when we were like watching film, and he just like was like just someone that just self-taught and learned how to make things. And so he went to the U.S. in 82, so 3 years prior, to kind of establish himself and be able to sponsor us. So at that time, you'd have to get somebody that was a U.S. citizen to sponsor you to come over. And it was easier to immigrate to the U.S. at the time than it is now. So you went 3 years earlier, and so it was my mom and my brother and my sister for a couple of years, and he would send us toys and things, and once in a while. But like, we knew it was going to happen. Well, I think I don't remember when I was 5, but like I knew that my dad went over, and we were going to go a couple of years later. So it was. I don't know if I quite understood what it meant. I think about it now as a parent of teenagers. I'm like, my parents essentially restarted their life to have a better life for us, that to a place they don't speak the language and really didn't know anything about, other than, okay, well, we have some relatives, so we'll go live near them. And it's just like a tremendous amount of, man, I don't know, like, I don't want to say not responsibility, but like that's a lot of courage to be able to like move to the other side of the world and to kind of bring your kids up. And
are they like in their late 20s or something at this time?
Yeah, I think early 30s.
Really, yeah. So very young, really.
Yeah,
to embark on such an adventure.
Such an adventure, and I appreciate them for. I think as I've appreciated more as I've gotten older, like, oh, I see the sacrifice they made. Like they just picked up and moved for the kids, and then they started over, right? Like my mom wasn't working in Sri Lanka, but both of them worked multiple jobs at closing bars or various working at gas stations and other things for years. So we never saw them a lot. It was like the three of us at home by ourselves. So we kind of raised ourselves in that way. And that, like, I resented. I'm like, how come other parents get to go to see my track meet or come see my play, but my parents can? And I didn't understand. I'm like, oh, they're just like trying to pay rent and just trying to get by. And this is how they knew the best way to take care of us was like provide for us by working hard. And I appreciate it now, but I don't think I really appreciated it as much as a kid, because I was like, all these other parents get to come to their events, our parents don't. Yeah.
And how did you get on? You turn up at school, and I guess you don't speak any English or any little bit. How was that adjustment?
I think for me, actually, all three of us, it was like less than a year, because I was in third grade in Sri Lanka. When I moved to the U.S., I went back to second, and then we had this ESL, English as a second language, kind of a program. And within a year, I think I was in honors classes or like gifted, whatever they call it, gifted, talented classes the next year. So I think as a kid, it just like you pick it up really quickly, or at least we did. And I watched a lot of TV and played a lot of games. I think that's just when you're forced to kind of speak a language, it happens pretty quickly.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, let's come to your second game for now. This is from 1995, so I guess kind of around the time that we're talking about here. Tell us about this game.
So Full Throttle was my second game. It came out in 1995, which is the year I graduated high school. So I'd been 18, which is the age my younger son is now. It's hilarious. I didn't think about that. We didn't have a computer till I was a sophomore. It was my first computer. But before that, I had friends in the neighborhood that had like computers, and we would go over to their house and play adventure games. So I I was playing like Atari, NES, and I guess Super NES. I don't know when N64 came out, but I was playing
97, 6 or
97.
7.
Okay, so Super NES still, and went over to my friend's house and had a personal computer, and we were playing King's Quest and like Space Quest, and I was like, whoa, like text parsers games, and then Full Throttle came out, and it blew my mind. It was so cinematic, and a lot of adventure games, you know, there was like this sort of hint system line you had to call, and there's like weird decoder things. Full Throttle is like more accessible with how the sort of the puzzles worked out, and you know, Full Throttle is a game by LucasArts, Tim Schafer's first, I think, solo directed game after, you know, while they worked on Monkey Island and things like that. But like, it's about a biker gang and taking on this sort of corporate version of the I forget, it's like a corporate empire of like this that made the bikes, and there was a murder, and he was trying to solve it, and you're like get framed for it. But it had better sort of framing of the characters and sort of a lot more, I would say cinematic a lot, but like I didn't understand at the time, but it was like, oh, this is really neat. Like really great voice acting, really developed characters, great pacing, and just looked amazing. Because I think it's one of the first games that LucasArts had done X-Wing game, I forget what it was called, Rebel Assault maybe, where they were using pre-rendered 3D sort of cutscene work, 3D models. And Full Throttle had 2D animated characters riding like 3D rendered bikes and car chases and things, and it just was really, really immersive for me. And I think this is the game I played. I'm like, wait, there's people that make this stuff? That sounds fun. How do I get into that? And I had been drawing and teaching myself Photoshop and like an early 3D program, just because I was really into it. And we had gotten a computer by that time, so I was like taking my computer apart and upgrading it and messing with. So like I was like tinkering and problem solving and doing a bunch of things at once. And this game really came at the right time where I'm like, oh, I should think about how do I get into sort of game making or animation work or whatever. This is before any of the sort of the craft schools or video game design schools. I didn't know that was the thing, really. I just played a lot of games and I loved art. So that game, again, just a pivotal time. Yeah.
Okay, well, I mean, let's pick up the thread from there. So you graduate school, as you say, the year this game comes out, and you're suddenly thinking, well, I'm good at art and I like games. Maybe I can put the two things together. But you go to art school first, right?
Yeah. So I was. This is a time where my parents were going through a divorce or starting to. They were not getting along well, and I think I was also lost, trying to kind of. And I think I'm thinking back now as an adult, like kind of those feelings of not belonging in a particular place. And then my parents going through trouble. I think I was also kind of lost and seeking a lot of attention. Yeah. So I was partying a lot. I love doing art, but I was like, I'm going to apply to this one school. It's called Savannah College of Art and Design. If I don't get in, I'll just I won't go. I'll just go work, go to community college or do something else. Because like I was a kid where if I liked the thing I did, I would excel at it. If I didn't, I could care less. And I didn't. My grades were fine. Definitely not like to the level of a immigrant kid standard my parents expected, but I was resourceful. But I did apply to Savannah College and got in. Went down there. I was there for 3 months and I got suspended. Partying too much. Art school there was way too much time. And I was.
Yeah, you've really got to go some to get suspended from art school.
And I'll tell you why. And
was there like a specific thing that happened?
Yeah. I talk about this now because it was a real pivotal moment because I was getting into drugs and doing a bunch of things and doing art. And Savannah, the college didn't have the program I was expecting. It was very basic, and I was like, the stuff I was teaching myself was like farther along than what the sort of the school could provide, because and I still didn't know how to get into games, but I knew I was like, oh, I could do computer animation. Maybe I can do like film effects or 3D for TV shows or commercials, which was my thought because I didn't know any better. But so I got there, and Savannah's a gorgeous place, and we had so much free time. We were living in these like loft spaces. I had like 6 roommates, and we were getting into a lot of drugs. And like I think right before we were coming back from, like, it was like fall, September till like November. November is like our Thanksgiving break, and we got some bad like batch of drugs, and I overdosed and almost died. And, woke up in the hospital.
Can you say what you were taking?
Oh, acid.
Right.
We're dropping acid. We're like, we're art school kids. Yeah, let's drop acid.
Sure, yeah. And then do some art.
No, we would walk barefoot through Savannah, like till 3 a.m, and it was like gorgeous, like brick paved streets, and we had like, bunch of kids got sick, all my roommates, and then there was a projectile vomiting for me, and like I remember being vaguely awake in a back of a ambulance. I woke up then in the hospital, and the nurse was like, "You're lucky. Your heart was going so fast. We thought you were gonna die."
Oh my gosh!
And I was like, "Oh shit!" And like got suspended from school, myself and a bunch of other people. Came back home to Maryland, and my parents were pissed. So.
Mm-hmm. So when you say suspended, are you fully kicked out, or they're like, you can't come back this year? Or
I think it was like a number of months or something, or a quarter or semester. But I was like, I'm not coming back. Like, it's like I was like real. It was a great. I can talk about this now because it was a real wake up moment. I'm like, I need to get my shit together and figure out my life. Like, I'm just like meandering. So I came back home. I went back to working at a Costco. It's like a warehouse place. I don't know what the big sort of warehouse places are and where you live, but like Costco's like this giant warehouse, and you can buy in bulk foods. But so I worked back there, and my parents were just pissed, and I started going to community college. And
were you like upfront with them with what had happened? Or did you try
I mean,
and
the
cover
school told them, and
okay, right,
yeah,
nowhere to hide.
There was no way to hide it. Yeah.
Right. And is it, I mean, if I put myself in their situation, I suppose it's a mixture of feelings, right? Because they're going to feel annoyed because they've made all this effort to bring you to the States, but maybe also a bit guilty because of like the stuff that's going on with them. You probably as a parent think, oh, this is slightly my fault. Do you know what I mean? Did you pick up on were all of those emotions going on at the time?
We didn't talk a lot about emotions at the house.
No.
So what I felt was sort of the extremes, like disappointment and pissed off and what are you doing with your life kind of thing. And I think I was harder on myself than anything my parents said, it wasn't like compared to what I was like, hey, I don't want to come back living out of the house. I don't want to go back to working at Costco. And like, so I was motivated to like, figure out a different solution. So I was going to a community college while working there and teaching myself more, like really diving into the sort of the computer art and animation part, and that actually led me to working at a startup. One of my coworkers that when I was working at Costco, his brother was going to architecture school. He's like, "Oh, you should talk to my brother because they kind of do these like 3D." So for architecture at that time in '95, and this is for Washington D.C. So architect firms would be like hire an artist to do like a 2D painting of like, here's the plan for this new building. Hire an artist to do a traditional like painting of what the building's going to look like. So well, my friend's brother and like their professor, like three of them, they were doing these sort of CAD drawings and then extruding them and doing like this 3D fly arounds of the space. So that's like they were doing that as a side hustle for all these architecture firms in DC.
Right.
They're like, "Oh, we think we can make money doing this. Let's start an animation studio." We didn't know shit about starting anything, but like, so we were, and they saw that I did like character work and video editing and graphic design work that I had taught myself. And they're like, "Oh, that's a good compliment. You should come work with us." So I moved into this house their professor owned. And it was like four of us living out of a house, just working on like client work for initially like architecture firms, and then Bayer, the pharmaceutical company, we did like this like 3D fly around, and then we would send out VHS demo tapes to local companies, and one of those companies was Bethesda. They happened to be 20 minutes from us, and we were hungry and cheap, and they were really cheap. They're like, could you do some cinematics for us for these games? So that's how we got hired.
So hang on, just to clarify, like when you sent this stuff to Bethesda, are you kind of saying, hey, we can do like fly arounds of your buildings or something?
Well, I at this point, I had like, in that year that I lived in this house with these other folks, I just developed like how to do character animation. And
right.
So we were doing like kind of more fantastical looking stuff for fun. And Bethesda's like, hey, we need cinematics for this game. And you like, hey, you seem like you can do it. So we chatted, and then they hired us to do like a cinematic for a game called Battle Spire.
So you sort of, accidentally fell into the industry almost then.
I didn't know anything about Bethesda. I hadn't played their games, and we didn't know what. And they were like, we were in Silver Spring, Maryland, and they're in Rockville, which is like 15 minutes. We just mailed them a VHS tape, and that happened to they called us back.
No way! Wow, that is wild.
So this would be 95. So I mean, or early 96. Yeah.
Yeah. Sure. Okay. Well, let's take a little breather and come to your third game, Eka.
Yeah.
So, such a great game. I don't think this has been picked on the show before. Incredibly.
Really? Wow.
From 2004. Tell us, what's the game?
It's a little game called Half-Life 2, which just blew my mind. Can I go back a little bit? Half-Life 1 ended my love of adventure games when it came out. I was working at Bethesda. I was playing through Grim Fandango, and Half-Life 1 came out. And I started playing Half-Life 1. I didn't stop for like 3 days. Like, it just like first person. And reason I picked all these games, I feel like there's like a progression to what made that like amazing. Because like before Half-Life 2, there was Half-Life 1, but there's all of these first person shooters like Doom and things like that. And Half-Life 1 and Half-Life 2 kind of extended the first-person shooter into a storytelling platform. Like Half-Life 2 specifically had all these sort of character moments that happen while you're walking around. They kind of like corralled you into a space, but like the fact that you can look anywhere and the character, is talking to you or giving you information or playing out a scene. It was so brilliantly done. And also the physics. I think physics was a kind of a new thing there, but the physics puzzles, the character development, how well they were written, how well animated, and then sort of the whole sort of the again, tons of atmosphere in this game, just world building, the fiction, the combat itself, and all the different sort of types of weapons and enemy, and then just the arc of the story just blew my mind. All of it just coming together. I think I was starting to appreciate, while I was doing art and animation work and like trailers, I was also doing 3D modeling, and I was curious about gameplay and games, game design, and like I just always had a curiosity for just how art is made in general. So I would always like bug the programmers and bug the designers. And so like this game just kind of took all those sort of the disciplines of making a game and was just a masterclass in how to craft an experience.
It's difficult. People probably don't remember now, but the gravity gun, that particular weapon that allows you to pick up anything and then fire it as a projectile, any object. I mean, it was just miraculous, wasn't it, as a piece of technology? We'd never seen anything like that before.
Yeah, and then just how once you get the gun initially, but then how it kind of changes at the end of the game too. Like there's just kind of the setup and payoff of some of the mechanics is so brilliant. Yeah, so
brilliant. Cool. All right. Well, so yeah, we've left you doing a bit of cinematics work for Bethesda. One of the things I wanted you to take us into the world a little bit is around the Matrix games. So you worked on Enter the Matrix and the Matrix Path of Neo, which I imagine was not too long after you started doing this kind of work. So, that was such a particular moment in game and film culture that's not there anymore. So tell us, what was that like working on those games? What are your memories?
Yeah, so I had worked at Bethesda for 5 years, and Bethesda opened up a LA office because we were getting into, this was like 2000. Yeah, 2000. The .com era for us old folks was the thing that happened where like people were like, oh, the web is the future, .com. So people were like, we had a design division, and LA, we had sort of like a entertainment division too that was outside, like making. So I was like heading up a team making. And we're in the main Rockville Bethesda office, but a bunch of us moved out to LA. So we're still like finishing up Morrowind from there, but also pitching like animated shorts and work to like various writers and directors in film and TV. And we were doing some games and some other stuff, but then The Matrix had come out prior, and it blew my mind. So there was like this, I was making like, in my spare time, I was making like, I think I made a Morpheus model, and then someone on the team at Shiny Entertainment who did Enter the Matrix saw it. It's like, hey, do you want to come interview for a character art position? I was like, The Matrix was one of my favorite things ever. And so I was like, I went down there. And so I was living in LA, in Culver City. Orange County is like an hour and a half south. So I went down there and interviewed, and I saw the project. And
was that Dave Perry's outfit?
Dave Perry's,
Shiny?
Yep, Shiny Entertainment. They were in a place called Laguna Beach. As where the original office was. Like, it's a small office, and then you have like this road called PCH, Pacific Coast Highway, and it's a small road, and then other side is the beach. So like the office opened up into the beach. People would come in the morning, go scuba diving before they started work.
No way.
It was like,
come on,
beautiful. A beautiful office. So I was like, oh, this sounds great. So I moved down to Orange County.
Yeah, I bet you did. Scubaing all morning and then working on your Morpheus model.
It was wild. And then on The Matrix, I was hired as a character artist, but then at like Bethesda and then at the little animation studio before, I always get myself into other things. So I started to get into UI and then like editing videos and clips and level design and level art stuff. And the thing about the Enter the Matrix is we had access to all the scripts. So I read the scripts for the movies. I was doing characters based on, the actual characters in the movies. So the Wachowskis were shooting a Reloaded and Revolutions. I just forgot the name. I forget what the new one is, but in Australia, and we would get set photos, like all, Neo in costume and all the characters in costume, front, back, 3D scans of their heads. So I would take that and build out the characters.
That's quite unusual, right? For that era, like very often people working on these kind of tie-in games would complain that the Hollywood studios gave them nothing, right? Because it was all locked down.
Yeah, so the Wachowskis are huge game fans. So they were also, they had this sort of like, I know there's a term for this every 10 years, but it's like multimedia approach or whatever, like cross-media or games
transmedia
and film.
or whatever.
Transmedia. I don't know what they called it at the time, but I think it's transmedia now. But like they, wrote the game and they were shooting footage for the movie. They were giving feedback on Animatrix, which is like those animated that were happening. And they were shooting footage that would be only in the game. So like in the movie, the side characters would go off and do a thing. And then in the game, you'd play those characters. So there's like this sort of connection of the Matrix stories between the anime, the two movies, and the game. And that was like their intent. So they were like doing all this work at the same time. So we had, from them, we had a lot of access. So we'd go up to LA and meet with them and show where we were in the game. But there was like,
oh, so you actually presented it to the Wachowskis?
Yeah, Tessa Wachowskis.
Wow.
Yeah, and there's layers of approval still. So we had like Shiny, and then we were owned by Atari or Infocom. They rebranded to Atari at the time, and then so we had Atari producers, and then we had to go to WB producers, the Wachowskis producers. So by the time we get feedback, it took a while, and for games,
a lot of people are signed off before they get to see it.
Yeah, so, and then everybody has their say in it. So it was a slow process, but it was. Do
you remember the first time you did it? Though the first time you walk into a room and you could have turned the console on, and what was that like?
It was pretty cool. I think they were definitely into it. They see where we're going and what they're and we would see kind of dailies and things from the movies too, and the stuff they shot. So they were really busy. So it's like, they had some feedback, and I think they would have rather just sat and play the game or whatever. But like, they were also trying to finish 2 movies, following up just like this huge milestone of a movie, and that was good. Like I think they had some feedback. The real problem for us is we had to finish the game the day, it had to be day and date from the movie, and that's just, it's really tough because games production.
So it's coming out on the very same day that it appears as cinemas.
As Matrix Reloaded did, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So that was a lot of crunching. I mean, I had crunched a lot. For me, I was like, oh, this is just the norm, right? I guess that's all I knew, because like from Bethesda to working on the
like
Matrix.
Paint a picture. What kind of sacrifices are you having to make?
Yeah. So on the Enter the Matrix, I think there was like 6 to 8 months of like 100-hour weeks, nonstop. So I was like, go home, sleep for a little bit, come back, and just kind of go till 3 a.m. or whatever. And it was just, it's insane.
You can't do that for very long, can you?
No, you cannot do that very long. And my wife was like, also, what the hell? Like, when are we going to hang out? When do we do stuff? And I was just like, I felt this just immense pressure to make sure we hit the date. Like,
yeah,
it felt, looking back, I'm like, these are now real problems. Nothing is worth sacrificing time with your family, but like when you're younger and that is sort of the mandate pushed on you, and you just internalize it and you just take on the pressure of that. And it's also like, I think, for me also,
gotta think of the shareholders.
I don't think I knew what that was at the time, but like I think for me also, like my value as a person was wrapped up in the work, right? Because so much of the work is like, if I don't do this, I'm a failure of some kind, right? I think that kind of echoes back, and I'm only unpacking this later, but like there's like guilt of failing at school, not living up to my parents' expectations, and sort of the guilt of them moving us to the US and like want us to have a better life, and then feel like I failed at it, like that kind of.
Yeah, but also this like incredible opportunity that you've been given to work on, what is probably the biggest movie in the world, or the biggest movie franchise at that time. Yeah. And you've kind of like parlayed your way into that situation. So of course you're going to like give it everything, right? Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, it's going to be worth the sacrifice. It's going to be worth the sacrifice, I think. Yeah.
And was it worth it?
I look back, I'm like, no, we could have done it better. we could have got more sleep. It would have been fine, but like,
Yeah.
it was hard because it was like building the engine, building this game with a very specific time limit, and making all these versions. And it was a rough game, but I think it did well. I don't know. I wasn't privy to all the numbers of the things, but like, it felt like a big deal.
And did you get to do any scuba diving, or was that out the window immediately?
No, we had moved offices because it was like,
oh no.
It was like we were a small team, and then we had to bring more people in. And I think at the end, we were in a bigger office, and it wasn't as nice. It was a little farther away in the suburbs, but like office park.
Just like the beach house office is what they show people when they're turning up for their interview. And they're like, oh no, you're working in that giant Soviet block over there.
Yeah, I didn't see daylight for a while. And they brought in like all these other Infocom Atari teams from like Australia and the UK to help finish because we had to hit the date. Yeah, it was good. I mean, it was a really interesting experience. I enjoyed sort of the learning about the filmmaking side of things and getting that feedback and seeing all the stuff. And the sets are beautiful, and just the costumes and like all the sort of the craft that goes into building something so massive and interesting. Yeah.
Very cool. Oh, well, thanks for taking us back to that period in history that's completely vanished, I suppose. But all right, let's come to your fourth game then, Eka. So this is from 2005. So again, like quite soon around this period we're talking about, I guess. Tell us what's the game.
Yeah, and I think when this came out, I was working on Path of Neo, or sort of the next follow-up to Enter the Matrix. And it came out on PS2. I actually remember playing this at the studio and I go back to sort of atmosphere. It was.
You got to say the name of the game.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. So next game is Shadow of the Colossus. And sort of it came out on PlayStation 2 around the time I was working on Matrix Path of Neo. I remember playing it specifically at the studio with people watching, and it's a game about this adventure kid who brings, I think it's his partner, she passed away, and he brings it to this temple, and I think there's some, you get the sense that like to bring her back to life, you have to do these series of trials, and the trials are killing these giant colossi that are in this fantastical land around the temple. And as you kill each one, you get the sense like, this doesn't seem right. This doesn't seem like a typical hero killing the enemy, bosses, and something weird about it. So there's that. And then it's really a game about just boss fights. There's 16. Yeah. Boss fights, and then everything else is what this game that sticks with me is the sort of the idea of editing and reducing it down to the base elements of a mood or a theme. And so in between the boss fights, you're running around your horse and exploring, and it's completely quiet and serene. There's no like mini bosses or other characters that you can hack and slash at, which a typical fantastic kind of fantasy adventure game would have that. So there's like moments of just like reflection for the player. And then it just ramps right into a boss battle, and each boss you have to climb on them because they're massive. And then some of them are flying, and some of them are, have different weapon you have to climb on. So it's like each one is a giant puzzle, and you learn by the end it's like not what it seems. And I think that sort of the storytelling and the atmosphere, and then the reduction of the game to just boss fights and exploration was such a refreshing thing around that time. I'd never played anything like it. And again, it just taught me another lesson about sort of like design and pacing and atmosphere and subverting player expectations for a game like this, and it just, and also technically how the fur was done, and it's how, like, especially on PS2, there's like these normal mapping things and things that are like, well, how are they doing this? And I remember seeing like like I think that the team put out some like websites about like how they did the fur, how they set up, and I was like marveling through that stuff, because as we're like, oh, we can use some of this on Path of Neo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or Keanu's hair.
Yeah. We got normal maps in that game, which is like a thing you don't see on PS2, and lighting and things.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, what an amazing game. And yeah, like you say, just nothing really like it when it came out. And yeah, so interesting to see, I don't know, you working on the Matrix game, which to my mind is, you know, very emblematic of that era. And then Shadow of the Colossus is just like this alien creation that sort of comes out of nowhere, isn't it? It's completely different to all the other blockbusters.
It was a poetic moment. Like, it was just amazing. Yeah.
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 Okay, well, let's whisk forward the clock a little bit then to 2017 when you co-found Outerloop Games, your indie studio. What was it that pushed you to go independent?
So from working on like Bethesda to Shiny, I think on Path of Neo, I was executive producer and art director and cinematics. So it was like, we had a team of 100 on it, and
it was a big team for the time.
It was a big team for the time, and I missed kind of being more hands-on. Like, I would do that I would like do sort of like run the art team. You know, we've talked about sort of what needs for the project and design needs and doing cinematics. And I was like, I really kind of miss being more hands-on. And we also had our first kid in Orange County. He was like, you know, was born down there. And I think more at that point, I was starting to kind of like focus on life, trying to balance my life out. We had a kid, and like, this is not a healthy way to live. And so my wife and I were really thinking about sort of like settling down somewhere. And so I had an opportunity to go back to Bethesda to work on Fallout 3, and opportunity kind of in Austin, Texas, and then Seattle. We ended up going to Seattle because it's like we missed trees. Living in Southern California for 7-8 years, moved up there, and I had worked at a couple of companies there that were smaller, like the one company before Outerloop was called Uber Entertainment. It's unrelated to the cab company, but it was like a 25-person team. And there I had met my co-founder, Justin, who's our lead programmer. And then I had worked with Azor, our animator, my other co-founder. And he and I had worked together on Matrix stuff, but I had brought him to the job in Seattle. And we were there for a number of years, worked on a bunch of games. And I think at that point, I was turning 40, and I was like, I think I want to start. I've been wanting to start my own studio for a while, and kind of think about sort of the games we talked about and the inspiration. I want to work on something that I can say something about, and also hopefully interesting gameplay, but interesting narrative and interesting themes. So I pitched to Justin and Azo while we were working on the company, like, hey, how about the three of us start a company? Like, at the very least, the three of us could make a really crappy game together, because I did art and design, and just did the programming, and Aza did animation, and we can get sound design and composing and effects and things. But I was also working on VR stuff at this time, so like PlayStation VR. I had pitched and signed a couple of projects. I was like, I knew how to do the design and production and art. And now I know how to like pitch a game and get funding. So if we could do that, I think we could start a studio, because we didn't have any money. So the three of us built a prototype, and I pitched them an idea called Falcon Age, which is about raising a falcon. It was mostly built for VR because it's first person. I thought mechanically that could be interesting, and then and fighting colonizers as a theme, kind of harken back to just British imperialism around the world in South Asia and things like that. I was like, themes would be fun to explore. It'll be interesting to explore. So we spent our weekends in the spare time just building out a 5-minute demo to showcases, and went to GDC and pitched it, and Sony, PlayStation liked it, and that's how we got funding to start a company.
And you committed to a different kind of culture. Certainly before that was fashionable, you were remote working and lots of things that are common practice now, but weren't at the time. Why was that important to you?
Mostly because I would commute from where we lived to 40 minutes each way to get to the office where Uber was. And Uber was right next to like Valve, right? So Valve and Bungie and a bunch of other studios in Seattle are like in this sort of city called Bellevue. And then I lived in a town called Bothell, which is like north. And we had our second son then. I would miss their sleep time by the time I got home. Most of the time I was crunching, or I would try to come home and go back, and I didn't want to keep missing. Like those years only come around once for each kid. So,
and also, like you said earlier, that's what you missed in your own childhood, right?
Yeah.
Was your parents working all the time.
Yeah. Unfortunately, like I knew when I had kids, I was like, I don't want to miss any sort of like school events and things. And I had started coaching. Actually, when I started the studio, a lot of it was like so I can be home and have flexible hours. So I could spend more time with the kids and my wife as well. So I started coaching when they were little, coaching sports, and that's something, because we had a flexible schedule, I was able to do that. And like, it was 2017 before the world went into sort of remote mode during the pandemic. But we had gotten used to. We tried Zoom, we tried Discord, we tried a bunch of things to see, and Slack, and at that point when we were shipping Falcon Age, we were 7 of us, so it worked. And then I was able to, we just had a little more open schedule with like, we don't have to be in the studio from 9 to 5 or whatever. We'll just talk about what we're going to work on and figure out sort of like our cadence, and then let life happen in between.
And I wanted to just return to something you were talking about right at the start, which was how, the themes of your game are about, of all of your games at Outerloop are about, family and reconciliation and things like that. And that you wanted to use games as one of the ways in which you can explore those experiences that you've been through. Has there been anything that surprised you when you've made these games, or when you've gone back and played the thing that you've made? Has it given you any revelations or insights?
Yeah, I think I was definitely, with each game, their themes. I mean, like, we're in the business of making commercial games, but I'm always like trying to find a way, can we say something that's specific to us or the studio or the culture? And I think for me, it's always been like, the specificity of it is how we connect with people. And with each game, we try to go like, most ideas start pretty rough and generic. Or, I mean, there's like a kernel of an idea, but it's like, it takes a while to like, okay, what if we just push it a little more, get more specific. And then I feel like that's when stories that have that specificity is how are the ones that connect the most. And that's always been sort of a goal of ours, that it feels, I don't want to say authentic, but it feels like there's a truth there, even though I might not understand the specific person's experience or the story. There's something there that feels more real because it's so specific. It feels, I can imagine how this character would get themselves in this situation. So that's always like a exploration with each game, is like, can we get more specific? Can we kind of get to a very specific place where, even if it's a fantastical world like Falcon Age or Dosa, and even in Thirsty, we're kind of supernatural with and surreal with sort of the fantastical battles that happen. There's like a kernel of truth and humanity that we're always trying to find. We're not always successful, but like that's like the goal. I think with each project, and then sort of the cultural perspective is like, how do we stand out as a company or as a game team, and kind of tackling the specific perspectives of whether it's like the food or the culture. I think, hopefully that lands with people and they can see how that stands out. Or if a screenshot, if you see one of our screenshots, hopefully it doesn't look like something else exactly. So,
and I mean, with Dosa as well, like, it's pretty clear, this is a game story about two family members returning home, connecting through the food all of that kind of thing that you've talked about yourself doing when you return to Sri Lanka. So how much of yourself is in this game?
I think it's like if you give the same game idea to 10 different designers or teams, you'd probably get 10 different games, because there's like these, while we're like, yeah, we're going to try to emulate this game or try to like go for this type of game, we have our own tendencies and likes and dislikes and patterns. And there's definitely sort of like the themes and that are dear to me and focus on a team. I guess it's personal in that way. There's always names of people that we put in for that too, but like I think it's just the connecting. In this case, it's also like not just your relatives, but found family, and you know what happens when why people have arguments and fall apart, relationships fall apart, and how does my memory of the situation versus your memory of the situation? Because memories aren't factual. We just have our own emotions tied into it. So how I remember a thing might be very completely different in yours. And we explored that in Thirsty as well as Dosa. So I think there's always that sort of, we always talk amongst ourselves on the team, like, would this be the way that I would approach it? Or like, would you approach it this way? Does it make sense? Does it make sense with the character? So there's a lot of our sort of like wants and needs and exploration and the theme and the stories and definitely in the characters. I think there's I think it's impossible to not work on an indie game and not have some sort of yourself in it. And I think that's the draw of indie games. Like, not that it's autobiographical, but it's like we're a team of 14, and I think you'll hopefully see what everybody brought to the table or to the game shows up on the screen.
Wonderful. All right, then, okay, let's come to your fifth and your final game, which is another very fine indie game from 2020. Tell us about this one.
Well, yeah, my last game is Hades. Again, 5 games is hard to pick, but I picked Hades because I got to meet Supergiant at a PAX when they were showing off Bastion, and they were in the booth next to us, and I went over, we played it, and I was like, oh my God, this thing is amazing. And I got to know that crew and over the years, and I've got to play test all their games early. And so Hades is like, I feel like a combination of, I think it's at the time maybe it was 10 years together. I can't remember. Yeah, I think 10 years together. So like for me, like Hades is a representation of how well that team have learned to make games over the years into a complete, just an amazing, amazing package. And like Hades redefines a roguelike in a way only that team could do. I think for me, I have not been a huge fan of the genre until I played this game. Because they wrap in sort of the tropes of the genre right into the narrative, and it's just perfect. And Jen's art and that art team is always amazing, and Darren's music, and I mean the design work, Amir and the design team, and of course Greg's writing, like all just like a team that is just doing their best work to get, and complementing every part of that game is brilliant. Like it's so good, and I put so many hours in that game, and I was just I use that as a certain like a goal for us too. It's like, can we hit that level of quality and work? And I know how much work they put into it, and it is not easy work, and it's very difficult work, and it takes a lot of time to get to that level. And I think not only is it a great game, but for me it's like a representation of like keeping the same team together over multiple games, and that is the only way you can get to this level of masterful craft and art. So like it's like I'm a huge fan of other games and game designers, and I think just in general how things are made is like one of my favorite things, and seeing people like excel and just from every game into every work. It's just it gives me a lot of inspiration. Like makes me want to keep making games. That's like Hades is that for me.
Oh, what a lovely tribute! So good, and yeah, you're dead right. You can see. Oh, so Bastion was the team's first game, wasn't it? And then they released 3 or 4 games.
Transistor, Pyre, and
that's it.
Yeah, Hades, and then Hades 2 now, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's go through your console. So we've got The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, Full Throttle, Half-Life 2, Shadow of the Colossus, and Hades. What a great console! Real crowd pleaser there, I think. Yeah, we need a name to market it to the world. Have you got something you'd like to call it?
I think for me, something around atmosphere and world building. I feel like that's like been a theme. All these places. Man, I don't want to call anything cloud, but I don't know. Atlas,
yeah. Very nice. Very nice. I think that already sounds a bit like a console. Yeah.
Atlas. It's probably a code name for a console.
Yeah. Well, there's a Japanese publisher, isn't there? Atlas with a U.
Atlas with a U.
With an A
oh my goodness.
Is unused.
That must be why. I wonder if it's just I gotta know now. Must be a take on Atlas with a U. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, this has been so good, and all the best with the game launch. I'm sure it's gonna be great. Just before I let you go, we're looking ahead. What kind of what do you hope Outerloop becomes as it continues to grow and flourish, and what do you hope it doesn't become?
For me, I hope we get to make another game. Keep the team together as much as possible, and then we're exploring a bunch of concepts, but like I think this is the hardest time I've seen in games, just with what's going on with the world too, and with the amount of layoffs and things, with the focus on AI and things, which it makes me sad. But I think I feel maybe not fully confident, but I feel energized because there are people that are doing great work still. And if no game was doing well, then I'd be worried. But like there's like amazing small teams that are doing just fantastical experimental and exploration work, and that just it's inspiring. So I hope we can keep making interesting things and for folks to enjoy. That's our sort of goal. Yeah. And in terms of what we don't become, I think chasing trends is impossible, and we're not great about that at all, and we don't plan on doing it. So I think for anything we do, it has to speak to us on a kind of primal level of the thing we want to say and the type of game we want to make. And from each of our games, player expression has been like a goal while keeping an interesting narrative. So that's always going to be kind of things where you're like, hey, how can the player express themselves in the mechanics and the systems or the story, and how do we still do what is story in a game? Like the player definitely, there's games that the player is creating the story themselves, and I think that's really interesting. So we're exploring all that as well.
Wonderful. Okay, well, and people can pick up the game on it's on consoles, it's on PC, and it's Dosa Divas.
It's Dosa Divas, yeah.
All the best with it, and thank you so much for this. It's been such a pleasure, and thank you for sharing your story with us in this way.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure too.
Thank you so much to my guest, Eka, whose new game, Dosa Divas, is out now. It came out a couple of weeks ago. You can get it for all of the platforms, wherever you get your video games. I think it's on PC, on PlayStation 5, Xbox, and Switch. I've been playing it on PlayStation 5. The game looks fantastic. I would describe it as a mixture between, I suppose, Venba and Final Fantasy VII, something like that. Turn-based combat with lots of little neat flourishes and touches, and loads of cooking, and some nice recipes in there as well. As well as the story. If you played Outerloop Games' previous titles, particularly their most recent game, Thirsty Suitors, which came out before Dosa Divas, then you'll understand the kind of aesthetic they go for and the tone. It's definitely more of that. On that note, definitely go back, listen to my previous interview episode with writer Meghna Jayanth, who is perhaps best known for her work on the Inkle game 80 Days. but she was also one of the main lead writers on 30 Suitors, maybe on Dosa Divas as well. I'm not entirely certain about that, but anyway, check out the game. You can pick it up, as I say, wherever you get your video games, and I think it's available on most platforms. A few bits and pieces to pick up with from my conversation with Eka. Firstly, he mentioned The Legend of Zelda and Super Metroid as coming out the same month for the Super Nintendo. That is in fact not true. They did come out the same month, but not in the same year. So in North America, which is where Eka was playing the games, they were released almost exactly 2 years apart. The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past came out on April the 13th, 1992, and Super Metroid was 2 years later, April the 18th, 1994. Just two really fantastic games. I still have my Japanese copy of Super Metroid, which is one of my most prized old video games. I didn't have it at the time when I was a kid. I bought it a few years later when I was in my early 20s and sort of picking up games that I'd missed from the Super Nintendo. I also got Yoshi's Island, has got the most amazing Japanese box art. But Super Metroid, if you've not played it, I definitely recommend you go back and try that. The atmosphere in that game is really something, considering it came out in 1994, the things that the team is doing with the Super Nintendo hardware. It's highly influenced by Alien. If you've played the more recent Metroid games, then you'll be quite surprised, I think, at how much darker, more foreboding the atmosphere is in Super Metroid. But I think it is a real high point, and they should go back to how it used to be. But that's just my view. Super Metroid, you can probably play it right now in your computer's browser, but I recommend, playing it ideally on an original Super Nintendo or Super Famicom if you've got access to one, but if not, then on some kind of television screen or handheld device. The analog pocket, that's a good thing to play games like that on as well. On the subject of technology in the Super Nintendo, this is all the hot news from 1991, I suppose, but Eka was talking about the Mode 7 effect, and he wasn't quite sure which of the Final Fantasies was in. So the Mode 7 effect was based off a particular chip that was in the Super Famicom, the Super Nintendo, that enabled some sort of rudimentary 3D graphics. It was used a lot by Squaresoft, that company, or Square as they were known in Japan at the time, to sort of do map overworld flybys where you'd see the sort of 2D art of the world map, but the camera would zoom around in interesting ways. If you've ever seen Pilot Wings, one of the early games for the Super Nintendo, you'll know that kind of effect. But it did crop up in a lot of Square's games, as Eka mentioned. It's in the game I most knew it from was The Secret of Mana, which uses it for the world map. But it's in all of the Final Fantasies that came out for the Super Nintendo. So that is in Japanese money, Final Fantasy 4, 5, and 6. In North America money, Final Fantasy 3 and 4, because of the bonkers naming conventions that were going on at that time, whereby Final Fantasy 4 in Japan is in fact Final Fantasy 2 in America. Did I say Final Fantasy 3? I think I did. I meant Final Fantasy 2. And Final Fantasy 6 in Japan came out in North America as Final Fantasy 3. So very confusing. Final Fantasy 1 is the same in Japan and in North America. It did not come out in the UK. I'm talking about at the time here. They've been re-released subsequently. Anyway, we're off topic. Mode 7. You can see some great versions of it in, as I say, Pilot Wings. F-Zero as well uses it to great effect. So does Super Mario Kart, which uses it for sort of scaling the racetracks. And all of these games used it in ingenious ways to give the effect, pseudo 3D driving effect. Eka wasn't quite sure of the release date of the Nintendo 64. I mean, this is one click away on Wikipedia for you. But yes, it was released in Japan on June the 23rd, 1996. And it came out in North America on September the 29th, 1996. And in Europe and Australia on March 1st, 1997. I think I said 1996/1997. Nailed it. I said that Half-Life 2 has never been picked by a guest on my Perfect Console. That is incorrect. I forgot about Peter Molyneux, and you don't forget about Peter Molyneux. He picked Half-Life 2. He is, though, the only other guest to have picked Half-Life 2, one of the first games to get a 10 in Edge, alongside Halo and a couple of others. There's been many more now, but it was a big deal at the time when Edge gave Half-Life 2 a 10. Other titles in the Half-Life series that have been picked on My Perfect Console include Half-Life Alyx, which was picked by Dominic Armato, who is the voice actor of Guybrush Threepwood in several of the Monkey Island games. He was a guest in my first year. And Half-Life 1 was picked by my dear friend Keith Stewart, the novelist and former games editor at The Guardian newspaper, and by Seamus Blackley, the co-inventor of the Xbox (original). So yeah, go back, listen to those episodes. They're all good ones. Peter Molyneux, in particular, I think stands out as spicy. Let's say that. Yes, Eka Larcy just mentioned, he asked me whether Shadow of the Colossus features 16 boss fights. I thought it did. I double checked. It does. Someone's going to mention in the comments that there's a hidden boss or something. But anyway, that's what the internet seems to think. I can't remember them all offhand. I remember the ones that stick in my head. But anyway, and how lovely, if you're watching on video, was it to see that footage from Shadow of the Colossus. I was, of course, using the PlayStation 4 remaster, as they call it. It was done by Blue Point, which is really they did a fantastic job on that. So yeah, if you've never played Shadow of the Colossus, which has been picked many times on the show before, you should go and do that if you own a contemporary Sony PlayStation. Right, okay, that's enough from that episode. As I said, Dosa Divas out now. Go and check it out. If you want to find out more about the podcast, then you can do so. The best way to do so is at Patreon. That's patreon.com/myperfectconsole. Why not join our community? If you join up as a free member, you'll get every month, you'll get to see who the guests are coming up that month. So that's reason enough to do it. But if you do want to support the show and it getting made, then you can become a monthly supporter just for a small amount of money, less than a London pint, I would say. And yeah, for that, you get your episodes early, you get them ad-free, you get video versions of the episodes coming out alongside the audio versions. There's no other way to get those right now. And you also get a bonus episode every month with myself and comedian Glenn Moore. So yeah, recommend doing that. Sorry, I'm a bit all over the place. Last night, I was at the taping of Saturday Night Live UK. If you're into TV and comedy, then perhaps you've been following that. I got to go along for that. It was a really amazing time. I've written a very long piece for the Observer magazine, which is now called O. They relaunched a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, if you're interested in that piece, this is a bit of a sidebar, but it's going to be out on Sunday. Why not support your newspaper if you're here in the UK, or you can read it online, or you can download the Observer app. It's a long piece. It's all about the show, what goes into making it, why. I think the premise, it's fair to say, is that everyone thought SNL UK was going to be bad, and it turns out it's not. It's really good. They've done a great job. I mean, they're spending £2.1 million per episode. We'll fact check that. That will be in the piece. By that time, that would have been fact checked. They're spending a lot of money on it. But yeah, I went along last night. It was an amazing time. I sat behind J.J. Abrams. He wasn't even on screen. He was just in the audience. Bananas. But anyway, yeah, if you're interested in reading that. In the Observer as well, I also routinely cover video games. I have a feature in there, usually once a month, about a video game and a review as well. So please do support journalism. It's important to do, I think, and there'll be lots of stuff that you enjoy reading in the newspaper as well. All right, back on to topic. If you would like to write to me, you can do that at myperfectconsole@gmail.com. If you would like to follow us on social media, you can do that at Blue Sky and at X. We're also on Instagram and TikTok. I am duty bound and very happy to thank our partners, Big Games Machine, the PR company, who help with posting online, running the social accounts. So a big thank you to them for all their support and help in doing that. Why not give us a follow? It's a great way to stay abreast of what's happening in the show, and you'll also get to little snippets and clips and things before they go out. So it's a great way to get little teasers of what's coming up. So yeah, I do recommend it. If you're not already, at very least, subscribed to the podcast, then please do that, because I will be back again next week with one more Perfect Console. Till then.